Welcome back to my flawed football pie. If this is your first video, I just want to tell you, if you have no idea what I'm going to do here, I'm going to plug the introduction video somewhere on the screen so that you can click on that video to see what I'm going to do when I introduce the series. So I am going to give some perspective about how I look at football. The reason why this perspective one is important to me is because this is just going to ground us. This is going to give us very basic information about football that we always need to remember when we go and move on and start talking about the other things. The other thing I'll call out here, like I will continue to call out, is all of these things together have to be taken into context because there are so many moving parts of football and because the sport is extremely dynamic. I mean, there's 11 players that have to do their job, 11 on offense, 11 on defense, 11 on special teams. So it makes this very dynamic. So this is the perspective aspect of the pattern. So I am marketing this as a high level overview of football. That is what you're going to get into this perspective section. Before I get into this video, don't forget, I'll say it again. If you haven't watched the introduction video, you have no idea what I'm doing, make sure you click off of this video, go watch the introduction video, and come back to this video so I can tell you all the things you need to know about the perspective and high-level overview of football. Let me get into this video. I created about 100 videos this season, previews, reactions, all the things. I've watched a ton of football. So I am giving my analysis on how I assess football teams, what I look for. And yes, you can apply this to NFL, college football, really any football, because football is football. It doesn't really change much. And some of the things that really matter, if they matter at one level, they're probably always going to matter because that's how the game works. Players just get bigger, stronger, faster, but the game still remains the same. So the first thing I usually pay attention to when I am assessing team versus team or how I come up with things is what is the opponent's strength versus the opponent's weakness. So what does that mean? So for example, is this team good at stopping the run? Is this team good at stopping the pass? Is this team good on defense? Is this team good on offense? Just looking at the very high level data is something that really helps me to figure out what kind of teams I'm looking at. And if my team that I'm looking at, let's just say my team is the Steelers and I'm looking at the Steelers versus the Chargers, I'm going to look at what does the Steelers do very well against what do the Chargers do very well, or what don't the Chargers do well. So whenever you are comparing strengths versus weaknesses, that is the first indicator that you will need to look at this and go, okay, let me see how my team fares against that team's weaknesses, and let me see how that team fares against the strengths. So the first thing I look at is the strengths versus weaknesses. It's very important just to give you a high level perspective of what is going on. The second thing I look at are recent game trends. What does that mean? So, for example, if something has been happening where I'm like, oh, okay, this team is struggling, or oh, okay, this team hasn't been doing good against this, or oh, this left tackle hasn't been playing well, or this certain thing has been happening, I have to equate that in my equation when I'm thinking about how teams are going to play. An example of this will be if you're a Colorado fan, you will know that Colorado struggles with scrambling quarterbacks. If Colorado struggles with scrambling quarterbacks and Colorado is about to play a team with a scrambling quarterback, I have to look at that trend and put it into my equation. And so if I'm looking at that trend and I'm like, okay, this might be a problem, then I have to recognize that. One thing to remember is everything I'm saying is just a data point. And what a data point is just you have to put all the information on a piece of paper and see what you come up with. If you haven't watched my behind the scenes video of how I create my football content, I will plug it somewhere here so that you can see it. But what I'm doing is I'm getting all of the major information so that I can start making a decision. This is how I assess football games. So when things happen, I'm not surprised because I'm like, oh, right, because that's what that team does. Or, oh, right, because this team doesn't do it well. So like I said at the beginning, your opponent's strengths versus your weaknesses, or your weaknesses versus their strengths, however you want to look at that. And then the second thing are trends. What are the trends? How do those trends look? What does it look like? What can I take from the team that I could actually look at something and see what they have going on? The other thing I'll call out here before I move on to the next thing is this is why I always say I always try to watch the team play before my team plays them so that I can see what they look like and see what is going on. For no other reason, for my eye test, so that I can begin to understand what this team is going to do or what this team likes to do. So that is the second thing that is important when you're assessing these football teams. The other thing I think is important, and this is similar to trends, is the team's identity. So how does this team usually play? Is this team usually a bully team? Is this team usually a team that doesn't score a lot of points? Is this usually a team that scores a ton of points? Is this usually a team that's very aggressive, that's very physical? Because if that team is very aggressive and their identity is being very aggressive, and my team is usually soft or smaller or slow, then it begs the question of what am I looking at? An example of this will be the Texas Longhorns. So the Texas Longhorns, Hook'em, is known this year for being very fast and athletic. So if my team is very fast and athletic and I'm watching another team and they're slow, I need to pay attention to what the Texas identity is and how that is going to go up against somebody else's team. Another thing you can look at when it comes to identity is, does this team like to run a lot? Does this team like to pass a lot? Like, what is this team identity? Because you will start to realize that certain teams play well against certain things. And so if you're able to realize how a team plays, or if you're able to realize their identity, then it will help you to be able to assess what you're going to be watching. So some people might confuse trends with identity. The identity is just who you are. The identity is just what you do. The trend is what you have been doing based off what your eyes are telling you. So again, a little bit tricky to try to figure out, but when I ask a team, what is your identity? A team will basically say, well, we like to be aggressive and run the ball up the middle and do this thing. Or we like to throw the ball down the field. We like to run to open up the pass, right? Everybody has a team identity. So it's really important to figure out what the team identity is to be able to assess them. One more last thing to bring this all together is, does your team play complementary football? What is complementary football? Does your team have a balanced offense and a balanced defense? If your team and special teams, if your team does not have a balanced offense, a balanced defense, and balanced special teams that are all working together, it is not going to work. So the other viewpoint of my high-level football overview is complementary football. Does your team play complementary football? Every phase of the game has to help each other. What am I even talking about? Here is an example. If your offense cannot sustain drives and your offense is 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out, other team runs out on the field, 3 and out, 3 and out. What that means is your offense is stalled, your offense can't sustain drives, and your defense isn't having time to take a breath on the sideline. And so if that's happening, i.e. the Steelers, if that happens, your offense is on the field for about 2 minutes, your defense is on the sideline for about 2 minutes, and then they have to come back in the game. And so you're not playing complementary football because you're not helping each other out. Another aspect of this could be special teams. If my special teams team gives up a punt return for a touchdown, that is going against my defense that has worked so hard to get the punt in the first place. And the second thing is that could happen is you're also working against the offense, because the offense now has to be more pressed and has to score more points because special teams didn't do their job. So the thing about complementary football is everybody has to do their job. You will hear people say 3 phases of the game. The 3 phases of the game means offense, defense, special teams. If the 3 phases are the game, you are not good, chances are your football team is not good. A lot of people get frustrated with me when I talk about certain teams and certain things, and I'm like, we're not a very good football team. Most of the time, if you want to look at a good football team is balanced and plays complementary football. And what does that mean? The offense helps the defense helps the offense, the special teams is working together. It's all working together because that is how this game is won. So if you're listening to this and you're trying to figure out, does my team play complementary football? Go look and see how your offenses ran. Is it balanced? Do you have an equal play design runs as you do pass plays? Does your special teams give up a lot of yards on punt returns, on kickoffs? Does your defense just give up a lot of points and a lot of yards? If your defense is giving up a lot of yards, that is also not playing complementary football, because you have to remember, once one side of the ball starts to press, it naturally causes the other side of the ball to press. I will use another Colorado example here. One thing that happened this year with Colorado is they couldn't stop the run. And so because you can't stop the run, the clock is continuing to run. And if the clock is continuing to run, now your offense presses. And what does that look like? Your offense goes for it on fourth down when they shouldn't, because they don't know if they're going to get the ball back because they don't trust the defense. So playing complementary football is very important. So just to recap, something to remember as we go through this series. This is not an exhaustive list. These are just ways that I look at teams and I look to assess them. So if you are trying to learn a little bit more about football, if you're trying to grow in this new space of like, how can I begin to assess teams better? Because I understand my team, but if I understand my team, I also need to understand somebody else's team, because my team is going to play the other team. And if you only know your team, but you don't know the other team, you're doing yourself a disservice, and you're probably going to be disappointed a lot, because what the other team does is going to surprise you. So having said all of this, this is the first episode of the pattern series to try to explain to you how I'm looking at football, the patterns that I look at in football, and what I think matters to me. I want to say here before I end this video, if you think about the 4 things I just named and take any time to go back and watch any videos that I created throughout the season, you will see that complementary football comes up a lot. Complementary football is probably the most important thing to just understand. And so whenever this is finished, you should be able to identify different things on a football field, call out different things, make sense out of different things, and feel more comfortable saying, oh, the reason why my team is going to win is because of this, and that. Right? That is the hope with this. Now, I don't know if I will accomplish that, but that is my goal, is to give you a different way to look at football other than just looking at the score, or just looking at highlights, or just looking at this, or just looking at that. Football is more dynamic. There's way more context in football than, do I have the better players and did we win the game? That is why some teams, a win is not a win. If it's ugly, it's ugly. It's just ugly. That's just what it is. And we all know there have been plenty of games this year where I have said, I've come on camera and I've hit record and I've said, that game was ugly. We played terrible. I don't care that we won the game. A win is not a win. That is bad. That is unacceptable, because you're starting to create those bad trends that you don't want to create. So anyways, I am rambling, but I just wanted to call out a couple of things here on how the rest of the series is going to play out, what to look forward to as you're moving along. And hopefully this will help some of you start to kind of understand a little bit more about why I think the way that I think, and maybe even help you think differently on some things. But I can promise you there's more videos to come with this series, because we are just at the P and we have a lot more videos to go through, so that we can start assessing football teams in all the same ways and start to make sense of what we're seeing and be more involved in the analyzation of what we're seeing, and not just taking information that other people are giving us, but actually using our own brains, using our own information, and coming up with our own conclusions. So I will end this here, but don't you worry. There will be another video coming very soon. We will get into the A, which are going to be the advantages of a football team and things to look for when you're assessing your team that could be advantages. So I will leave that as a little cliffhanger, and we'll get back to this soon. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.